All right, so here are 3 people skills that can make you millions. And this is important because in life, your ability to make money is relative to the relationships you have with other people. There would be no need for money, if you think about it, if there was no other human involved. And there would be no way to get money or anything that had a store of value if there were not other people involved, right? So your ability to build wealth in this life depends on how you work with and through other people. But how do you do that, right? Like, what are the tactical skills that you need to start developing? I'm going to give you 3 in this video that you can start implementing right away. The first one is personalization. Personalization is when you're in a conversation with somebody, recognize that you are in a conversation with an individual, a human, a singular person that has a singular point of view inside of the unique perspective of the cosmos that they have, right? And so the very first thing that you can do to personalize a conversation to them is 1, use their name. I know that seems like really simple. It seems really trite, like use their name. But the truth is, Dale Carnegie pointed this out decades ago in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The sweetest sound in the world to any individual is their name. If you go into like a crowded place and somebody yells out, Danielle, and your name's Rick, you're not going to pay attention, right? But if your name's Danielle, and you hear somebody in a crowded place yell, Danielle, you're going to instantly look, right? Hell, like if your name is Rick and you're in a crowded place and somebody yells Danielle, you might not even pay attention. You might not even register it. And yet there's something about hearing your own name that pierces that veil of your subconscious that goes, oh, I need to pay attention. Somebody is calling me, right? Same thing when you're talking to somebody. When you use their name, it instantly ingratiates you to them because it makes them feel that you actually care about them as a person, that you're actually seeing them. So use their name, and don't do this like a weirdo where you're like every sentence and at the beginning and the end of it, you just keep using their name. Don't be a freak. Within the first 5 minutes of meeting somebody, try to use their name 3 times just to re-ingrain it inside of your mind, because one of the reasons a lot of people struggle with this, and if you use this as an excuse, shame on you. People are like, I'm bad with names. People that say I'm bad with names are effectively saying I'm a bad human that doesn't care about other humans. You're effectively saying I don't care about other humans, right? Like if you really cared about me, you would remember my name, right? Like the fact that you don't simply means you don't care about me. So get over it. And maybe that's the key here for you if you want to get better at remembering names, is to remind yourself this is a person with a unique, interesting perspective on the universe and a life outside of this situation. They are the main character in their own movie. God damn, I am interested in what they have to say. If you become interested in other people's lives, I bet you remember their names much more frequently than you already are. So that's the first one. Working on personalization, use people's names. The second part of personalization is actually making a point of remembering things about that person that you can then use again in the future. It could be in the same conversation, something that they said at the beginning of the conversation. Maybe you introduce yourself like, hey, what kind of things are you into? And they're like, you know what, I'm into skiing, right? Maybe at the end of the conversation, something circles around and you bring it back to the skiing. Like, hey, have you actually ever skied at this place? And like, oh, you remember that. That's really cool. Most people in a conversation with a stranger or even with somebody that they know and like and love are often just sitting waiting for their opportunity to speak, right? You're not actually hearing what the other person has to say. You're waiting to get your story, your words in. And a lot of times they could just be, droning on and their words are going in one ear, right out the other. Show them that you're listening by actually bringing things back up that they've pointed out to you before. This is really powerful if you really want to make a lasting impression on people, is when you meet somebody for the very first time, make a mental note about something they told you that is interesting enough so that in the future, if you were to ever cross paths with them, you would remember that and be able to regurgitate it in that moment. Here's a case in point. I was playing with tennis a couple weeks ago with my buddy Brandon. I had never met his girlfriend. She shows up at the court and she just stopped in because she was leaving town to go down to this other city to visit some friends and do a thing, right? So she just stopped in very, very briefly in the middle of our set, said hi, gave him a kiss goodbye, and then left, right? So I see her about 2 months later in a random setting. And the first thing I asked her, I said, how was your trip to such and such place? And her and Brandon both look at me like, how did you remember that? Like, how did you remember I went to there? And it's like, because I made a point to remember it. And suddenly they were, one, very impressed with my memory, and number two, very impressed by the fact that I cared enough to remember. So if you want to become better with people, improve your people skills, start caring about people and personalize the conversations that you have with them. Remember their names, remember the things that they told you. Next is most people are really shitty conversationalists, and they go into small talk mode. And this, I think, if you struggle with conversations with strangers, this is probably why. If you have the mindset that's like, I'd rather not talk to anybody because they're all kind of boring and it's all kind of uninteresting. I used to be in that position. The reason that is because you're a really shitty interviewer. You're really like, if you go into a conversation and first of all, like here's the secret sauce. If you want to be like a really memorable conversationalist, make it more about the other person than about you. Let them do 80% of the talking and you only do 20%. Your job is to ask really good questions that get them to open up and share things about themselves. Now, here's the crazy thing. People love talking about themselves. And so at the end of that conversation, if they've spent the entire time talking and sharing really cool stories about their life with you, they're going to feel really good about you, right? You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to impress them with your knowledge of like esoteric Roman Empire history. Like you didn't have to like impress them with, all your cool gadgets and widgets and stuff that you own. You just had to sit there and ask really good questions. So maybe one of the most important people skills that you can develop is the ability to ask really good questions. Everybody has something to teach you. It's your job to figure out what that thing is. And that's usually based off of your ability to ask really good, probing, insightful questions. So become a better interviewer. That is a powerful people skill. The last skill I want to share with you is, okay, what to do when you actually do talk, right? If they spend 80% of the time talking, you spend 20% of the time, what do you actually say? And it is very powerful to have the ability to tell compelling stories. So storytelling is the third skill, the third people skill that if you want to make millions, I would recommend everybody develop. The ability to weave a narrative, to share a story that intrigues, that entertains, that educates, that inspires. Like that is a very powerful skill because story, at the end of the day, it is the source code of the human experience. It's how you understand and make sense of the universe. It's all through the lens of narrative. Most people struggle with storytelling. They don't know how to put together like a compelling character, an inciting incident, how to take them on an escalating sequence of events into a satisfying conclusion. Most people don't know how to do that. And so they end up just telling you a sequence of events, and then this happened, then this, and this, and this, and this. And then at the end they go, I guess you had to be there, right? And that's lame. Like, so learn how to tell good stories. And then here's a pro tip: sit down and rehearse your stories so that you have the ability to tell them without having to think through them for the very first time. You practice them enough that it becomes second nature. You know where the funny parts are, you know where the pauses are, and you can deliver the story without it being performative. That is a crazy idea. You can deliver the story without it being performative. It actually requires far more rehearsal and work than most people realize, but that's the trick. If you want to be a really cool like conversationalist and tell great stories that make people go, wow, that was awesome, you have to practice in private so you can be celebrated in public. So those are 3 people skills I believe that will make you millions. Go work on these, and I'll see you in the next video.